I am an Ashkenazi Jew from Manchester, England. I grew up in Manchester in a Jewish household. I studied languages at university in London and then became a journalist. Um, and I moved to Australia about 25 years ago to work for a British paper that I was already attached to in the UK as a foreign correspondent. So I've been a journalist for, pretty much is 40 years this year, which makes me feel very old, but I also feel very, very privileged to have been able to spend all of that time investigating incredibly interesting subjects and writing about them, which are probably the two things that I most love in life. Having the opportunity to travel and to dive into subjects that I think are important, interesting, and worthy of, any attempts to sort of better clarify and illuminate them. My work is very important to me, which you can probably tell. I'm passionate about the work that I do. It's really, it's my driving force. It's my identity. It's not something that I think I'll ever stop doing until, unless there were health reasons that prevented me. I just love it, and I feel very lucky to do what I do. For every country in the Middle East or North Africa where there was a very large and thriving or a substantial and thriving Jewish population until there wasn't, which usually happened around sort of the 50s, 60s, 70s of the last century. I wanted to choose one key diaspora where I could go and investigate, the contemporary community and see how people had picked themselves up and restarted their lives and were continuing culture and customs from the old country. My choices were, really, sometimes it was obvious where to go. Perhaps 90% of Yemeni Jews are in Israel. The vast majority of Libyans are also in Israel, but they're also in Rome. Hence, I went to Rome as well. Pretty much all the Algerians are in Paris and Marseille. The Iraqis are in the UK and Israel, as well as spread around. I had to be, I wanted also to kind of cover most of the kind of continents of the world, if you like, to give a sense of the very wide dispersion that occurred with Jews from these countries after they did have to leave. They either had to leave, or they felt they needed to leave, or they felt they had no future in a particular country, or in some cases, they were expelled, or it just wasn't safe to stay. So I wanted to cover, the Americas, North and South, Europe, Israel. I mean, those would be the main places. I did want to include Australia because that's where I live now. Although there are not massive Sephardi, if you like, communities in Australia, I came across a very interesting little community of Egyptian Jews in Adelaide, which is almost dying out now, actually, but it was quite a sweet, lovely story of Jews from Cairo who moved to Adelaide at a time when, Australia was really attracting new migrants and wanting people to come and, start new lives here and bring new blood and new skills. And the Jews of Cairo and Alexandria did do that in Adelaide, which is really a small city in Australia. I mean, even now it is, and certainly back in the 50s, last century it was. And in fact, most of the next generations of those Egyptian Jews have moved to Sydney and Melbourne as being bigger cities with more opportunities. And also a bigger pool of Jewish people to marry. So I was also looking for, interesting stories of where people had moved to, while trying to achieve that geographical spread in terms of where the Jews had moved to from the Arab world when they did pick up and have to resettle elsewhere. I would say that Arabs and Jews lived together mostly peacefully for hundreds of years in all or nearly all of the countries that I'm looking at, that I'm researching and visiting, if it has happened in the past, it can surely happen again. And perhaps we need to look at these histories and these personal stories to take some inspiration for what we're confronting in the present day.